Mark and I go back a long time. I was I think, his first clinical doctor postdoc at the National Cancer Institute in 1974. And so we've been at this for a long time. Actually, it was a good choice I made because breast cancer has really been I think, a rewarding career for me during all those years. There's been a lot of progress made. It's a intellectually challenging and very interesting disease, and most importantly, the survival is improving, as you've heard. Mortality rates have come down 2% a year for the past almost 20 years now, and they continue to fall. And it's that investment in research that we made, actually probably starting with the war on cancer in 1972, that we're now seeing the fruits of that investment. So although most patients, or many patients, the majority of breast cancer patients today are cured, still all too many women die of the disease. It's a very common disease. And so when you add up even a small percentage of those women who die, it's a large number of women. And around the world, it's a very, very large number of women. And why do patients die? And they die because of this word metastasis that has come up, and many of you know what those are. But I've been asked to talk a little bit about metastasis from a more basic perspective, and then comment on some of the newer things that are very exciting, some of which were presented today. This is not exactly my area of interest, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, and so I'm learning as we go. And attending this symposium, I think this is the fourth time I've been here, is also an educational process for all of us. So probably the best way to think about metastasis is if you go back and read the literature. Over 100 years ago, a surgeon named Halsted invented the radical mastectomy, and he thought that if you took off all the chest wall and the breast and everything around it, he thought that the tumor was confined to that local area, and that if you removed all of that, you would cure the patient. And his 5-year data were kind of impressive. He published them in, I think it was 1897, and his 5-year data were better. But in 1931, when a resident of his, who was then chair of surgery at Hopkins, presented the results of all the patients that had the radical mastectomy over the past 30 plus years, only 10% of the patients survived. And so despite the fact that they removed all this local tumor, and yet most of the patients died, it would seem obvious the reason for that. That before the breast cancer was diagnosed, seeds of the tumor broke off and went to other parts of the body. They weren't evident at the time the surgeon did the surgery, but they had to be there, because when you remove the tumor in the breast, later on those seeds blossom into tumors in the liver or the lung or the bone. That's what caused the patient to die. And yet, it took about 35 or 40 more years for people to really think of that in a formal way, that it was these seeds of the breast cancer that spread to other parts of the body that were responsible for the mortality, and that we needed to do something about those. So that's what they are. Metastases are seeds that came from the primary tumor and now are involving these other organs. It's helpful to think about those in two forms, though. There's microscopic metastases, or micrometastases, which is what many women present with. They come in with their primary tumor in the breast. Some of them don't have any metastases at all. They're cured with the surgery. Some of them have micrometastases, which we can't detect by any scan or by any other parameter. And then some of them have macrometastasis. Micrometastasis are curable by our adjuvant therapy. So we can get rid of these little seeds that are there very frequently with therapies that block the estrogen receptor, or therapies that block HER2, or chemotherapies of one sort or another for other types of breast cancer. But macrometastasis we can't cure. So even if you have a 1 centimeter, a tiny tumor in the liver that we can detect on a CAT scan, that patient is not going to survive breast cancer. Even though we've caught it very early, we think it's very early. So why is that? Why can we get rid of the micrometastasis? Why can we get rid of the tumor in the breast often with chemotherapy and so forth? Why can't we get rid of that 1 centimeter tumor in the liver and other macrometastasis that will recur if the patient develops resistance to our standard therapies? And that's where we're beginning to start making progress. learning about these metastases and learning about how they got there in the first place. And why are they different than tumor cells from the same patient in other parts of the body? And it's clear that these cells are different. These cells that have spread from the tumor to other parts of the body are different. That's why they were able to spread in the first place. And then second of all, where they wind up also talks to them and changes them in yet another way. So the benign cells in the liver or the bone marrow or the lung, those cells are contributing to the cancerous process in a number of ways. And we're now learning about how that's happening and then what we can do about it ultimately. Today, we heard several exciting presentations that relate to that. We're finding proteins that are targetable. That is, we could develop treatments that block them, that are present in these metastatic cells. We've learned that the benign cells in and around the tumor, so if you biopsy a tumor, no matter where it is, even in the breast, most of the cancer are the cancer cells, but in and amongst the cancer cells are benign cells of all kinds, lymphocytes, white blood cells, macrophages, fibroblasts, all kinds of cells, blood vessel cells. And it turns out that these cells, as I mentioned, contribute to the growth of the cancer cells in a variety of ways. And one of the things we talked about today, one of the speakers, was that there are some types of cells that are in and around the tumor that prevent the immune system, the body's immune system, from attacking those cells. And so if we could restore that immune function, it would be another way to kill or treat these metastatic tumors. So I think these are some examples of what we're learning about the metastatic process that provide some hope for the future that we will be able to eradicate these cells eventually. And there are several ways that we might do that. And just to summarize a few, we could develop better therapies, better systemic therapies that get into the bloodstream and go to other parts of the body and cure those and overcome resistance that may develop to our standard therapies. So that's one way. That's what I study. Another way would be to augment the immune system, as I mentioned, in a way that would get rid of these cells that are in these distant sites. And then targeting resistance pathways, which is another way of saying getting better therapies. And we're learning now what are the pathways that are activated and cause the tumor to be resistant when you block the estrogen receptor in an estrogen receptor positive tumor, or you block HER2 in a HER2 positive tumor. Some cells are killed and some tumors are cured. The patient never has a recurrence. But others, the tumor cell, while it may be partially damaged by that therapy, it can then develop escape mechanisms to overcome the therapeutic block. And now the tumor is being driven by a whole different set of genes and gene products, and we need to find out what those escape pathways are and target those to block the resistance phenomenon. And then there was another very interesting talk that this is a lead into our next speaker, I think, and that is the role of the brain, if you will, or depression in this whole process. And you're going to hear some really interesting information, it was interesting to me, about how depression itself can have biological endpoints that can make the patient with breast cancer have a higher risk of having a recurrence and the cells outsmarting our current treatments. So with that, I'll conclude, but I agree with Mark. If you think of breast cancer cure as a puzzle or as a pyramid and you have to build the base of the pyramid, you know, maybe we're halfway up of the pyramid or we've maybe solved half of the puzzle. And the rest of the half, and so that's why we've made such progress over the last several decades. Now our job is to fill in the rest of the puzzle and the rest of the pyramid through additional research. And I think partnerships with groups like yours, other groups around the country, the federal government, the doctors, the scientists, all working together, I think does provide hope that breast cancer will not be the public health hazard that it still is today. Thank you.